And all right, go ahead and go, and I will share the link with you in just a sec.
Awesome.
Excellent. Wow.
We don't need any music.
I'll cut it in after. Unfortunately I've got another show coming in at 10 o'clock, so I have to be quick with this one.
All right. Don't worry about music. We don't need music today.
Yeah, no, I'll splice. We'll put it in post.
Okay. Is your other guest coming or no?
Yeah, he's working. He works for UPS, so he's like running a little late. So he said that he will be on though shortly. So we can start without him. Yep. Yes. Wow.
Courtney, this is my dad.
Hi.
Hi.
How you doing?
Good. How are you?
Great.
And this is like my big brother, Randy.
Hello.
Hey.
That's Christy. That's my podcast host.
Yay.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meeet you, Courtney. I'm Chris. Yep.
Nice to meet you.
All right, you are live and good to go. I'm
going to
shoot you link in a sec.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. What up?
All right, so I guess I'll do the honors. So tonight on Closet Conversations, we are talking about a rather serious topic, a very much needed topic, and we have some special guests. We have 3 guests that are with us today, and our topic is pretty much practically the issue with police brutality, and the recent incident. Is that Mr. Floyd, correct? So
George Floyd.
Yeah, George Floyd. So Mr. George Floyd, we want to kind of get some insight from, we have a former police officer with the Detroit Police Department, as well as a current Detroit police officer with us on the show. And we also have a female guest that is also going to bring in her insight as well on the topic. And, I am Chrissy Mack.
And I'm Berkeley.
And together we are
Closet Conversations.
Y'all got to work on that.
Horrible.
I think our audio, it comes in at different times, because once I see you move your mouth, I'll move my mouth.
We got to go 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
1, 2, like 2, 3, 1. All right. So Jessie, would you like to introduce our guests that we have?
Absolutely. Well, the first gentleman you see that's down, he's on the left corner of me. I don't know where he is on your screen, but the older, more distinguished gentleman is my father, Commander Jesse Banks.
Pops.
Eddie.
Hey,
former.
Former. Excuse me. I still like to use his name if I get in trouble, so I'll be like, Commander. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
My former boss.
Yeah.
There you go. Yes.
Yeah.
So, former police commander Jesse Banks, and also we have Randy. Are you an officer, sergeant?
Corporal.
Okay.
Corporal. Okay.
Randy Randolph, and we have Miss Courtney Cook. You can play the role as, I guess, like a civilian, right? We're going to ask questions, and then you can feed in, unless you have some like police background that I don't know about.
None whatsoever.
Cool. Awesome. So, we've had a series of injustices, I guess, if that's a word, starting with Ahmaud Arbery in Georgia. That didn't really have anything to do with the police, but, it did definitely hit, the news. The young man that was jogging in the neighborhood and was gunned down by a father and a son and was murdered on camera.
Right.
Breonna Taylor in Kentucky, the nurse that the police, I guess, bust into her crib without even saying that they were the police. Boyfriend, thinking that somebody was breaking and entering, shot at the police, and then ended up in.
And they actually already had the suspect in custody that they were looking for. Let's be clear. Yeah.
Please. So negligence on the police behalf as well, which ended in her death. And then most recently, George Floyd in Minnesota, who I guess wrote a bad check. And
no. Apparently they showed up because there was a report that he was attempting to pass a counterfeit $20 bill.
Oh, it wasn't even a check.
Yeah.
Okay. Counterfeit bill. Wow. We see those a lot.
A counterfeit
$20
bill.
$20 bill. Yep. Dude lost his life over an attempted counterfeit $20 bill. Makes perfect sense. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yep. So, yes, and you see like a group of police officers kneeling on this man on the ground as he's saying, "I can't breathe. Please get up. Please get up." And then one cop had his knee on his neck, which I believe, took him out.
Yep.
I guess quickly for the officers, I just want to ask.
And hey, let's not forget Central Park. That just went down Monday.
Lady, right, the white lady that didn't have her dog on a leash
and literally attempted to weaponize the NYPD against somebody. Like
exactly.
I've never seen. She deserves an Academy Award. I've never seen a better acting job from zero to frightened white woman in my life. Yeah.
I'm going to call the police, and that just escalated. But I'm happy that he was there to videotape and show that it's freaking crazy. But yeah, so we've had plenty of events that don't sit well. I mean, I think in all communities. Dave being our Howard Stern and
yes.
You just keep me around as your token white guy, and I'm okay with it. Like don't try to make it more than what it is. I'm okay with it.
He brings the knowledge, and I wish there were more white guys like him. You know what I'm saying? That thought like him. But anyway, for the police officers, I guess quickly, what made you want to join the police force?
Well, Randy, you want to go first or what?
Sure. I'll go first. Well, it's since I'm born and raised in Detroit. I've always been a type of kid to help, older people, just help out people in general. So that's always been my thing, to help people. Now, I was originally supposed to go out to the United States Coast Guard, but Detroit Police was hiring. I felt that it was a good fit for me, so I filled out the application. I actually filled out the application for the state and the city. I was 18 years old at the time. I was too young to be a state trooper, so Detroit hired me on at 19 years old, and here I am 23 years later. So growing up in the city and becoming a police officer in the city has been very, very good to me. So I have no complaints about being a police officer. I love my job, and I plan on doing it 7 more years. Prayerfully, God gets me through and I can retire like Commander Banks and live good.
Yeah.
That's right.
Mr. Banks, what made you want to join the police force?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. Actually, it's probably by mistake in a sense, but along with an experience that I had as a young kid. I worked several paper routes, and one particular Sunday after leaving the paper station, heading home, I think I was 13, 14 maybe, and as I was crossing a street, and I'm not sure you guys are too young for but the Big Four was comprised of 4 people, 1 uniform, and 3 plainclothes officers. They were all white. When I came on the police department later on, it was only 100 black police officers out of 6,500. So it gives you an idea. And that was 1972. But anyway, that particular day, I crossed the street, and on my way home, had some money in my pocket. I was happy. And the Big Four pulled around the corner and motioned me to the curb and said, "Come here." I said, "Okay." And, I always had respect for the police officers, So I came over to the car, and it was cold. he rolled the window down, but I was outside freezing, and he asked me if I knew this guy because he was pointing at somebody on the dashboard, and I'm saying, I can't see it. He says, well, come closer. So I came closer, and I still couldn't see it. So eventually he lowered the window, and my neck was inside the car, and he rolled it up on me and said, explicatively, do you know this guy? I said, sir, I don't know him. I don't know him. And my neck was, caught up in the car. So eventually they lowered the window, and I was able to leave. Here's irony here. When I got out of the military, I worked a couple of jobs, and I decided to become a police officer. And my very first assignment was in the precinct that I grew up in. And as I came through the rear door of the precinct, guess who I see? I saw the same white officer who rolled my neck up in the window. And I said to him, I said, do you remember me? Now, and I had a room full of guys, all white. And he says, no, I don't remember. I said, I'll take you back about 5 years, or 6 years at a time. He said, no, I still don't remember. I said, well, maybe if my neck was rolled up in the window, you would recognize me. And he says, what do you mean? I said, you rolled my neck up in the window, and I was only 14 years old, and I never forgot that. And so he denied it, but he retired a week later after that. Because I confronted him in front of all his colleagues at that particular time. So I did join, and I worked patrol, and I was promoted through the ranks all the way up from police officer all the way to commander. And that's pretty much where I'm at this point. So I'll, ready for any questions or any other, things I can share with you guys regarding brutality.
Right. Courtney, before we ask the officers any more questions, do you like the police?
It's relative. It sort of just depends on what environment I'm in. Honestly, I've counted on the police on multiple occasions, but then there have been occasions where I've been harassed by the police. I remember one particular incident where I know for sure that they thought that I was a black male because it happened to be the middle of the night and it was raining, and I'd forgotten to take my hood off while I was in the car, and they pulled up next to me, and I didn't think anything of it. Then they fell back and pulled up behind me and flicked me, and couldn't come up with a reason why they had pulled me over. And I knew for sure that it was because they thought that I was a black male. It was just a feeling. So it really just depends on the circumstance. I'm glad that the police are there, but I also feel as if there's a certain amount of ego that has to go into taking on a role like that, and that can be dangerous.
Crystal, do you have any questions? Because I have like tons written down.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess we can get started with get started with the whole idea of the incident that would happen. Like Corporal Randy, Mr. Randolph, what are your thoughts on the situation that happened, or do you think that things could have been handled differently with the incident with George Floyd?
Absolutely. First of all, once you get a person handcuffed, there's no reason to have them on the ground like that. It's one thing. Now I will say this: there is a technique that we use for somebody that's combative to get them down the ground. Now the technique is not to put your knee across their neck; it's to put your knee across the back of their shoulder blades. And once you get them cuffed, then you get them up. You don't keep them down there on the ground. You get them up and you put them in the scout car. Okay, that should take all of seconds, depending on the circumstance. Because sometimes we deal with very large people, and sometimes it does take a couple of officers to get them restrained. But to just sit there on his neck like that is absolutely 120% wrong. I don't care how you twist it. I don't care what he said beforehand. I don't care what he did. It's absolutely unnecessary.
Well, and let's be real, for what was it, 7.5 minutes? There's no way in hell that it takes 7.5 minutes to diffuse a situation when you have your knee across the back of someone's neck.
Absolutely.
None.
Yeah, I would like to see how they responded initially. That it was supposed to be in a $20 counterfeit bill, but that I was wondering whether or not they went to the merchant first and said, "Hey, how do you know that is counterfeit?" Because the average police officer doesn't know.
Right.
They're taking your word for it because of what? And that becomes the question. Why then did they pursue this young man as a result of someone else's allegations? Because that's all it is at that point, an allegation.
Well, and so exactly, it's still allegedly, and so you've also still got, like, this. Obviously, this story is still evolving. Things are still coming out. Some of the stories that I've seen referenced said, basically, he was sitting in his car outside the establishment, and we've all heard this phrase too many goddamn times, matched the description of who they were looking for. And so it may not have even been him. Like I said, that's one of those things that, and again, I haven't read anything in a few hours, but the last time I read, that was still fluid.
Yeah, but that was vague information, I think. Again, like I said, the merchant probably precipitated it by the call. And then the officers responded, and they should have gotten, more information than what they apparently didn't get. Because, like you said, it could have been the guy just happened to be in the car and not that particular guy. So I guess, the story is yet to be told.
Well, and I mean, here's the thing: cards on table. I mean, here's a real life situation in my world. I mean, there was a time where I was in a bar and I had gone to a bank and I had pulled out some cash. And I'd been at a bar and I handed them, instead of using a card, I just handed them some cash that I'd given. And she came back to me and she said, "Hey, one of these hundreds is counterfeit." And I was like, "What?" And I was floored. And so literally I was like, I don't know what to tell you. Fine. You know what? Just give me the cash back. Here's a card. And I did. I wound up going back to the bank the next day and filing a complaint and all that stuff. But obviously, nobody called the cops on me over a counterfeit 100. Nobody, put their knee on my neck over a counterfeit 100. Wow. Let alone a 20. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of points to this story that are just infuriating.
Yeah.
So I right before we started, there was a video of, I guess, the restaurant owner or employee that said that from their video cam, Mr. Floyd did not resist arrest or anything. So this was, excessive force for basically, no reason or their own reason, whatever that may be. I know Randy said that you guys only used that move or restraint, which he claimed, goes behind the shoulder blade. What would make an officer want to put their knee across somebody's neck? As a commanding officer, Mr. I keep gonna call you Daddy. Have you ever told an officer to do that?
No,
that's not a part
of, it's not a part of the training. But again, I'm not sure. The training should be universal, and I'm not sure what Minneapolis, their training, is like. But like Detroit, like Randy said, we have takedown techniques. But the question becomes, why was he taken down? Right. I encountered, I think I've shared with you, Jocelyn, as a young police officer, we got an officer in trouble, a call, and it was late at night. And when I got there, the suspect had the officer, in around his neck, and the officer had this guy around his neck. It's like they were wrestling. And But the officer that was there, his partner was really not engaged in trying to help the situation out at all. So I had what they call a Kel light at that particular time. It's a metal light, which at this point I'm trying to get the guy off the officer, you know. So I put it around his neck, you know, because I had nothing else. I didn't have a baton or anything. That was the thing that I had in my hand. So as I was trying to pull him, you know, I said, hey, look, man, let him go, you know. And as he didn't let him go, so I exerted a little bit more pressure, and he still didn't let him go. Then I exerted a little more pressure, and I heard something like crack. I said, did you hear that? That's what I asked him. The guy said, yeah. I said, and he let him go at that point. So, you know, there are good police officers out there. Unfortunate incidents that occur. I've seen them time and time again. But you don't have to take those measures, the drastic measures. And that's why I'm interested to find out, why was he even handcuffed? And then, as Randy was saying, the takedown technique was different. I don't know. I know they're, you know, they learn from those mistakes. Hopefully, you know, the department will then take a close look at what's going on or what happened, and as a result, it won't happen again, you know. But it's just so many things that happen that we really need to look in depth about. And race relations is, because it's out of hand, you know. I was a commander, actually as a sergeant. I worked at a precinct.
What's she doing?
Hello?
Yeah, I'm here. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Okay, now, as a sergeant, I worked in a precinct that, you know, it was all white back when I was there. And what I found, and why I think the insensitivity comes into place, is that the white officers, they patrolled the white neighborhood in zero crime, where we had an entire precinct that comprised of 70% black. They were rarely there. So I think, and you know, it's ingrained, and unfortunately, that black people are bad.
Mm.
And until something like that changes, we're going to continue to have these Floyd incidents.
Exactly.
Yeah, but it comes from the top, folks. I've always said this: if the top allows it, then it's going to continue. If you know, if they condone it, and they do. There's a lot of departments, you know, that's business as usual, and nobody's ever, you know, punished for it. But
in these sort of situations, when is it okay for officers that are not necessarily participating in the brutality, but they're witness to it? At what point do they step in and try to correct it? At what point do they say something?
you know, Courtney, you're correct. It should have been that way. They became participants by watching, even though they didn't put their hands or their knees or whatever on this guy. They watched him. You have a duty to prevent, you know, an unlawful arrest, period. As a young police officer, again, I had occasion on a traffic stop. This white officer, the guy didn't roll his window down. So this guy, it was a traffic stop. So the officer bust out the window and tried to pull this guy through the window with his family in the car.
Whoa.
I prevented it. I stopped it. They tried to bring me on the charges for interfering.
Mm.
And I'm saying,
Wow.
whoa, what's going on? Something's wrong here, you know. But again, all the supervisors were white, all the commanding officers were white, and on and on. So, you know, that's why we need more people of color on police departments. I'm not sure what the makeup of Minneapolis's police department is, or the city, but you got to have that. But you got to have dedicated officers, not just by merely being there. You got, if you see something like that happen, you got to correct it. You have a duty to correct it. Malice Green, I'm not sure if any of you remember Malice Green.
I remember Malice Green.
Malice Green was beaten to death.
Right.
Inside of a scout car. And the supervisor, who was black, watched it. They charged him too. They charged him. So, you know, it comes from the top.
It does.
I did not tolerate it, period. Randy knows enough about me.
Yes.
No.
Yes. And I think when it comes to recruiting recruiting is very, very important, because when you recruit somebody from a different environment, for instance, you recruit somebody from, we'll say, Gaylord, Michigan. They've never been to Detroit other than a Red Wings game. Now they want to come to Detroit to police in a community that they have no knowledge of.
Right.
Not just on the crime aspect, but something as simple as a garbage can complaint that you might get. If you don't understand what's going on in the environment, it's going to be hard for you to police in that environment. If I pull up to a call and two neighbors are arguing because this neighbor says, oh, he took my garbage can, that's my garbage can. Well, the garbage can belongs to the city. So I'm not going to approach the situation because this guy is aggressive. I'm going to separate him. The person that doesn't have the garbage can, I'm going to help him get a garbage can to solve the issue. At that point, so you have to know when to police and when to help, the situation. It's not just because we're called doesn't mean we have to act. But see, if you don't understand your environment, you don't know that. So when you recruit people outside that environment, you're going to get the misunderstandings. You're going to get the, as the officer did to Mr. Floyd, over doing his job more than he needs to because he thinks he needs to do that because he's the police. Those are the things that you're going to get.
Do we know that the officer wasn't from that area?
We don't know. I mean, I've worked with white officers that were born and raised in Detroit, and you can tell because how they communicate with people in the community.
Right.
You can tell. They don't get out the car with the big head. They approach the situation calmly. They give people a chance to explain what's going on. They try to get an understanding before they act, because sometimes if you act too fast, you can act wrong. So you have to take your time with these things. Sometimes it takes you to have to act quickly because that's how the situation is going. But again, it goes back to understanding your environment that you're working in. And a simple way I can put it is this. I can't go to Commander Banks' house and tell him how to clean his house. I don't live there.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how he operates it. So I can't tell him how to run his house. Same thing with policing. You can't come from the suburbs and come down to Detroit and think you're going to be effective. It just doesn't work. Now, sometimes some officers do catch on and they're able to be effective. I'm not saying that they're just not effective at all. I'm not going to say that. Some do, but it's a very small percentage. And you can tell by the way they talk to people.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. And you can have all the training in the world, but it comes down to common sense.
Right.
Common sense, and it goes a long way. In terms of what I used to tell my police officers, I used to go to their roll calls, you treat everybody with respect. Even if the person's in Brooks Brothers evening gown or a bag lady or someone pushing a cart, they deserve your attention. And you can't assume just because they're in that condition, in that situation, that they're bad people.
Right.
A lot of good people, bad things happen to them.
Yep.
Wow. So do you believe that these officers you said that they were what? Were they put on some type of like suspension or something, or like what?
Well, I believe they were terminated.
They were fired?
Terminated.
Yeah, they were fired.
Yeah.
Okay.
So of course the punishment doesn't fit the crime. So I mean, what do you guys believe? Like, you feel that?
I mean, you have to.
Is that enough?
You have to give it time to develop, because there are a lot of things they have to look at. They have to look at the cameras. They have to look at footage. They have to look at everything in its totality. And even at this point, even not having all of the facts, is the force they use was still unnecessary. Yeah. But for court purposes, you want to have everything lined up so that when they do make a decision, it's the right decision. So, you know, nothing happens, you know, with the judicial system, nothing happens overnight. You have to have everything in place in order to get the right convictions and make the right decisions at the end of the day. So it's going to take a minute, but people have to be patient. You can't, you know, everybody has a right to be upset and, you know, want to express their feelings about it. And that's fine and dandy, but to go out and do what they're doing in Minnesota, that's not going to speed things up. You know, you have to find other ways to protest and get your point across without having to, you know, tear the city up. And because that's not, like Commander said, it's not going to change policing, because at the end of the day, you have to remember too, you're still dealing with human beings. It's still
Right.
Flesh and blood, and police officers, just like regular people, go through things at home.
Exactly.
We deal with a lot of things at work. We deal with a lot of people at work on a daily basis, and a lot of times, those things affect every officer differently. Some officers know how to turn that thing on. Some of them don't. Some of them burn themselves out to the point where they can't even think straight when they're out there on the streets. That's why they make those decisions like that officer did unnecessarily. You know, I don't know his mental state, but
Right.
obviously,
what we got, you know, those officers also have rights, and that's the problem. They got a union. So that's why it's very important to educate the public, the community, which I did, as to what would happen in an event something like this happened, unfortunately. They do have rights. They have rights, and they got a process. So people want it right now, and I understand that. But those officers, I would imagine in the end result, some of those officers are going to get their job back.
That's what I was like. That's
Wow.
being terminated. Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I don't believe termination is permanent, depending on.
Some maybe, but I do believe maybe the bystanders, depending on what they were doing, they're going to get their job back. It's one of those. I'm going to fire everybody right now, but you know, we know in the end, some of them are going to come back. You know, it makes the public feel good for now.
Mm-hmm. That sounds like that don't mean nothing to me.
Mm.
As a bystander, if I were to see something like that, so whomever was filming it, I would assume is, you know, a citizen, right?
right.
Like, what could I do if I see something that I know is not, you know, good policing, that the power is being abused? If I was standing there, of course I wouldn't be filming it because that's just not me. But as a person that I am, you know, can I be like, hey, you know, get off of them? You know, some people say, hey, I would have jumped and pushed the officer up off of them. Like,
yeah, that's what I said. Yeah.
Wrong move.
Yeah.
Wrong move.
Make the situation worse. You know, just let the police officers do what they're doing. And, you know, just like you said, you can film it. They should have body cams. So I'm assuming that if they do have body cams, it's going to show from the beginning to the end. And that is telling. Your picture's worth 1,000 words.
Right.
So it's nothing that we can do. We will have to just stand there and just watch someone get murdered?
Pretty much. I know it sounds cruel, you know, but like I said, even in my instance, where I saw a police officer abusing somebody, I did, but they tried to get me for interfering with an arrest, you know, and here I'm thinking, you know, I'm doing the right thing because, wait a minute, this is not right. Here you're going to pull this guy through the window with his family in the car on a traffic stop. Like, okay, something's wrong. Yeah.
How often
but you have some officers
have to take any sort of sensitivity training or bias training, anything of that nature? Is it required at all?
Yes, we have a whole week of refresher courses. All like it's so many of us that we have blocks of classes that, you know, like, you know, A through D might have from January to April and so forth and so forth. So we do have refresher courses. We do have sensitivity classes. We have classes on how to deal with mentals. We have sensitivity training where we talk about our biases. you know, the racial aspects of it. We have all of that. But you got to understand, at the end of the day, I could take a class, but once I get off work and I go back to my environment that has trained my mind to be biased against the other race, that one class is not going to do it. That's
How
why.
often are there repeat classes? How often are there reminders of the previous training? Is it like once a year?
It's I think we have it twice a year. Twice a year. We have it once, like in the beginning of the year, and then again at the end of the year. So it's like I said, it's so many officers. It's hard to have classes. I say, if it was up to me, we would have it once a month. But unfortunately, there's so much going on. We're a large city, so we can't have classes on a consistent basis like that. And so, but we do have it at least twice a month. Every officer has to have it twice a month. It's mandatory.
Okay.
So yeah, we do have to have those classes.
I have a question. So, you know, a lot of police officers don't have social media. However, this particular officer that is accused, you know, for the killing of George Floyd, you know, he has a Facebook profile, and it's been circling all over the internet, where he has this hat on and it says, you know, "Make whites great again." And he's like holding some type of fruit or something, like a blackberry or something.
Yeah.
And, you know, and they put when he had his knee on the victim's neck,
Right.
it was like a side-by-side picture.
Mm-hmm.
So my thing is, as a police officer, as his fellow, you know, colleague, why aren't things like that reported? And, you know, like, because it's kind of sort of like he's already letting you know that he's like a closet racist.
Period.
So,
right.
So where does that come in, where like somebody speaks up in the department and say, hey, you know, you might want to check this guy out because he's on the internet, you know, doing these things or whatever that's, you know, that could cause some, you know, racial controversy.
Yeah.
So like, why?
Well, they got internal affairs. You know, they got different type of units that actually, if you turn that information over to them, then, you know, they would then investigate it. Just to give you an idea, something Randy said just struck me. You know, you have all the training in the world, but common sense come into play.
Absolutely.
Common sense, that comes into play. I remember, but you got racism, you know, like I said, I go back to when I was on the job, and, you know, and sometimes it's hidden, but back when I was on the job, it was overt. On the bathroom wall, they had a nigger cop is still a nigger. Mm. Now, you know, no public can go into that restroom and write that on there. Then they had the top 10 assholes on the department was at the precinct was Jesse Banks 1 through 10, because I was making them do their job, and they didn't want me to have them do their job. That's why that's when I was promoted to sergeant. I wanted to go back to the precinct so I could help supervise, because black at the time, blacks never saw a real black sergeant, and whites never saw a sergeant that made them do their work.
Right.
And I was one of the most hated. But in the end, I'll never forget this one guy's name. Is Dan. I ain't going to use his name. I'm about to say his name.
Say his name, Daddy.
But I'll never forget, he pulled me off to the side some years later. He said, you know something? He said, we hated you. He said, but we respect the fact that you were consistent and never changed. You know, that was my badge of honor for them to say that, because they got it at some point in time. So.
And Chrissy, to answer your question, we do have a social media policy on the department that's in place. We do have a unit that monitors our Facebook pages. We've had several officers to get fired for pictures and comments that they have made on social media. So we do have a policy in place for us to be mindful of what we say, and not just on the racial aspect, on a political aspect as well. If you get on there, like we had a captain who supported Bernie Sanders, and he put it on social media. Well, he got reprimanded for that because, you know, it's almost like conflict of interest almost. But we are not to support political leaders while on duty. He
Right.
took a picture. He took a picture in his uniform with Bernie Sanders, and he wasn't supposed to do that. So he was reprimanded for that. So we have social media policies in place. But again, you know, you have people that see and don't see. You have people that don't want to get involved, just like regular citizens out in the street that see things, they know it's wrong, and they say, you know what, I'm not gonna get involved because, you know, I don't want. It's the same thing on the police department. You have people that just don't want to get involved, which is not right. But at the same time, you know, just like Commander said, when he attempted to stop the officer from doing something wrong, they tried to reprimand him, and he was just trying to do the right thing. So a lot of times you have to ask yourself, by me doing this right thing here, am I willing to take what is going to come with it? Because a lot
That's
of
literally the police's job. It's to protect and serve.
Correct.
So it's got to be a moral call. There's got to be some sort of twist in your moral compass that draws you into being an officer, and understanding that bills have to be paid, and you know you have to protect your livelihood. At the same time, how can you sleep easily or continue to work in that same position, knowing that you essentially aided in the murder of another human being? What was the whole point in joining the police force at all?
yeah,
Courtney, once upon a time, there you had to live in the city to be on the police department.
Right.
The union fought that hard, and they ended up, you know, changing it where you can live anywhere. You know, we had one guy lived so far up north that, and he made it to work on time every day. I mean, he was way up there. Took him almost 8 hours to get to work.
And that's got to tell you something right there. Why would anybody travel that far for any sort of job? Either there's something going on in your psyche where you're set and determined to have power over other people, or there's something inherently wrong with you where in your vicinity nobody will put you on the force.
Right.
Or the
Right.
pay was probably good. I mean, you know, it was probably more of a, you know, income for him to be in the city versus being in a small town where he was from. So
Yeah, but I'll say this: there are black officers that grew up in white neighborhoods that get on
Correct.
the force, and they have the same attitude.
Yep.
And again, even now, I have to talk to new officers that come on, and again, you can tell by the way they communicate with other people and with fellow officers, whether they grew up in the neighborhood and they went to public schools. You can tell the difference in their communication skills. So you have to, as for me, what I do, I try to enlighten them on what they need to do to sharpen their skills, because like I told one white officer, I said, man, you got 2 strikes against you. He said, what do you mean? I said, you're white and you're a police officer, you're not from Detroit. I said, those are your strikes. I said, when they see you out there in the street, they're going to smell you coming from a mile away. I said, and they're going to test you, and they're going to wait for you to do something wrong so they can clock you upside your head. I said, so you need to get, you need to understand this environment that you're getting ready to embark on. You have to understand in order to be an effective police officer that this is what you choose to do. Now, me as a veteran officer, I can only do so much to try to guide these outside officers, and even some homegrown officers. We have to try to guide them in the right direction. But again, common sense and having the right mindset is very essential for this job. And again, you made a good point. You have to have morals and values. If you don't have morals and values, you're not gonna be good at nothing. I don't care if it's a police officer, a doctor, a lawyer. Your morals and values are not where they should be. You're not gonna be successful.
I had a really bad encounter one time with a black officer, and it was very evident he was not from Detroit whatsoever. But I remember it was a day I had just come back home from a funeral, and I was walking my dogs, and for whatever reason, one of them was a little sick, so he just kept pooping. I ran out of bags by the time I was getting ready to cross the police officer. He was in his car just waiting in the alley, and the dog stops, and he's gotta go. You know, at this point, I don't have any more bags, and the officer is talking to me from the car, from the intercom system, and just harassing me about picking up the dog poo as if I'm gonna pick it up with my hands. At that point, I realized, you know, he just literally has nothing better to do right now, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do in order to get out of this situation. I was lucky enough that he let it go, but I couldn't even shake it the whole day. Is, you know, just why? Like, what was the point in that? I'm sorry, we're not in West Bloomfield. We're in downtown Detroit. There's actual, literal human feces probably in the corner next to your car. Get over it.
Yeah. You know, it's amazing though. The suburban police officers and those neighborhoods, the Floyd neighborhood, they police altogether different than what they do in the urban area. Rather than in your situation, they probably would have given you a bag, you know, or whatever, you know. But you know, that's what we have when the concentration of Black and brown people and being policed by, you know, whites. But in their neighborhood, they don't lock you up for just anything. They'll take you home if they stop you if you were drinking, rather than.
I got taken home. The police officer asked me at Michigan State. He actually asked me, was I mixed? Remember, Daddy, I told you that?
Okay.
He was like, you're not mixed. You're not white. You're not mixed. And I'm just like, no, are you going to let me out the police car if I said yeah?
He wanted you to be white adjacent.
Wow.
Somehow.
Yeah. I don't even know why that came up.
Yeah. Well, it's again, like Randy was saying, it's the environment where they came, you know, where they come from. And, you know, it's like you guys, you know, you guys went to Star and those places like that. You know, I mean, you start talking like them. I'm saying, well, damn, you know, but, you know, people make an adjustment. Sometimes people cannot make adjustments. Right. And that's what Randy, I think, was alluding to. You know, it's one of those situations where I firstly thought, and taken away from Randy, I'm not taking anything from Randy, I thought a police officer should be 21 years of age before they came on the police department. Because you know, an 18-year-old police officer cannot buy ammunition. Somebody has to buy it for them.
Really?
Wow.
Yeah. Yep. So you can see they're not even mature. That's why I also felt that the military was a good spot to bring, you know, because they are accustomed to taking orders and you know, they've had some experience in life where an 18-year-old, their mom or dad been telling them to get up and go to school for the past, you know, 12 years. And now suddenly you give them a gun and a responsibility to police older people, and they don't know how. Only thing they can relate to is what they've seen on television or what their partner have told them. Because the first thing they'll tell you, forget all that stuff that you learned in the academy. This is the way we really do things.
Yep.
Well, Podcast Detroit has another show that's about to start momentarily. Do you have any final words or thoughts? We got about 2 minutes.
Well, I'll say this. Her name's Courtney, right?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say this to you. When it comes to law enforcement, and, you know, if you get pulled over or they're saying something to you that you feel is not worthy of, you know, their time or whatever the case may be, just understand this. They're on one side of the fence looking through a particular glass. you're on another side of the fence looking through the glass in another way. Okay, so you have to understand that, yeah, it might not be necessary in your eyes, but you know, sometimes they're just trying to do a job sometimes. So even if you may feel that it's unnecessary, to get out of it and get back home to your family alive and out of that situation, just comply. Even if they're in the wrong, don't buck the system. Let them do their job. Once you're free and you're home alive, you feel like something went wrong, you have that right to go to that precinct and make your complaint. That's your goal at the end of the day, is to get out of that alive. Because God, Lord knows that, you know, if you're walking down the street and you see a drug deal going down, you ain't gonna go over there and challenge them.
Absolutely not.
Right.
None of my
Can
business.
we video record? Is that okay? We can?
Yeah,
Okay.
everybody
Put
video
your
now.
phones up. Put your phones up.
Yeah. But you know, that can also be intimidating and take it the wrong way. If you say you're going to pull out your phone, then that really might take it to another level when it doesn't have to be that way.
Y'all don't have it on.
Like Randy was saying, you know, you can always file a complaint, and if you file enough complaints of the same type of incident, the officer should be addressed at some point. You never know.
Right.
Yep.
Okay.
Right. Wow.
Stay safe and wear your mask.
Well, thank you, Courtney. Thank you, Courtney. Thanks,
you.
Dad. Yeah, thanks, Corporal Randy Randolph. Thank you guys so much for joining the show. We hate to go. We hate to go, but we got to wrap things up. So
I enjoyed it.
That was a good episode. Good content.
Yep, I enjoyed it as well.
All right, take care.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, yep. So I'm Chrissy Mack. You know, we're Closet Conversations on PodcastDetroit.com, Facebook, and also Instagram.
And everywhere fine podcasts are sold.
That's right.
All right. Get the plug in there. All right. Y'all take care.
Yes, Jesse,
All
by all
right.
means, show off your shirt. That's what we're looking for.
Yes. And Jesse, one more time.
And we are Closet Conversations.
All right. Bye.
Love y'all. Good night. God bless.
All right. Bye now.